Guillermo del Toro has spent his entire career unpacking the relationship between creators and their creations, cruel fathers and their monstrous sons. It's in the mechanical kaiju of Pacific Rim, constructed by humans to fight humanity's mistakes. It's in Hellboy's struggle against his purpose as an apocalyptic force and being an agent for good within the Bureau of Paranormal Research and Defense, caught between the purpose assigned to him and the life he wants to live, on top of being an ostracized monster. I mean, Hellboy is probably the biggest stand-in for Frankenstein's monster we've seen in a Guillermo del Toro film up until this point. In Pan's Labyrinth, Ophelia finds herself trapped between the captain's brutal paternalism and the faun's cryptic manipulation, both father figures claiming authority over her fate and how that fuels her defiance as she comes of age. The Shape of Water gives us Elissa, mute and marginalized, who recognizes in the amphibian man as a fellow creation, both shaped and scarred by forces beyond their control, both seeking something their makers never considered, the right to love and be loved on their own terms. Pinocchio, perhaps Del Toro's most obvious Frankenstein-esque meditation before this adaptation, literalizes the metaphor. A grieving father builds a replacement son only to discover that the child he creates is not the child he lost, that the creation cannot be controlled or predicted, and that love means accepting what is rather than mourning what isn't. It's a film about forgiveness. Each movie across Del Toro's filmography peels back another layer of the same wound, examining the ways creators, whether it be fathers, gods, artists, systems, whatever, impose their will on what they make, and how those creations must somehow forge their identity from the raw materials of that often cruel inheritance. Now, finally, Del Toro confronts the text that's lived with him since his youth, the text that's at the core of his entire filmography, Frankenstein. To simply call Frankenstein the latest Del Toro joint would be to undersell the momentous feat and what it means to the filmmaker. It's the convergence of every monster, every father, every forsaken creation he's ever put on screen. This is the story he's been reverse engineering practically his whole career, approaching it from every conceivable angle until he'd excavated enough of his own soul to finally face it directly. It's Del Toro's equivalent to Denis Villeneuve's Dune films, a piece of literature beloved to him since childhood, whose adaptation he has spent a career building to.
I was a Catholic boy. I am a lapsed Catholic man now. I turned on the TV and there he was, Boris Karloff and Frankenstein, and I all of a sudden realized this is what my grandma talks when she talks about the Messiah. This is my Messiah.
Catholicism doesn't just inform his aesthetic, though the film is draped in Catholic iconography, but it played a part early on in his understanding of the world and the nature of creation and existence. Catholic doctrine teaches you that you're born in sin, unworthy of love until cleansed, until brought into the fold through ritual, through baptism. You are broken from the start, created imperfect by a God, and must spend your life atoning for the crime of existing. The relationship between creator and creation in Catholic theology is defined by debt, by unworthiness, by the child's endless obligation to the parent who made them and the God who made it so. Del Toro grew up under the weight of that doctrine and learned to see himself through its lens of original sin and required obedience. And like Victor Frankenstein, like the creature, he eventually came to resent it. He adopted what can probably only be described as the evangelical equivalent of an atheist. Equally extreme, just, pointed in the opposite direction. He rejected the guilt and the control, but found himself still shaped by what he was rejecting, still wrestling with the same questions about fathers and sons, creators and creations, the obligations of love in the face of abandonment. Guillermo del Toro's Frankenstein is, simply put, his magnum opus, precisely because it's the most perfectly imperfect thing he's ever made. It's a little tedious, a little unrefined in places, but undeniably the purest extension of who he is as both a person and an artist. It's almost biographical, this story about blasphemous sons and cruel fathers, about the arrogance of trying to outrun inherited sin only to perpetuate the cycle in more destructive ways. Victor Frankenstein is an expy of Del Toro the artist, trying to control every frame, every creative decision, building his monuments to immortality. He's also his father, and subsequently, himself as a father. The creature, on the other hand, is Del Toro the man, the former Catholic child rejected and abandoned, learning empathy through literature and pain, ultimately forced to forgive a father who perhaps is undeserving of it. Through this lens, Del Toro examines the banality of creation and the complicated ways we're shaped by our environment. He unpacks the pursuit of conquering death at the expense of actually living life, the tension between freedom and containment, the necessity of pain and love and forgiveness all at once as he reclaims both Old and New Testament imagery that has haunted him since his childhood. Patient and melancholic, paired with sumptuous visuals and a soulful, career-best performance from Jacob Elordi, Del Toro's personal catharsis reverberates through every frame of Frankenstein. The master of misunderstood monsters has finally awakened something new in this timeless classic, not in spite of its imperfections, but because of them. But you don't need to reanimate a corpse to feel smart. All you need is today's sponsor, Brilliant. You've heard me talk about Brilliant on the channel before, and for good reason. They're my favorite platform for learning new skills that are tailored to the way you retain information. Brilliant helps you become a better thinker and problem solver through interactive lessons in math, science, programming, data analysis, you name it, building your understanding of concepts from the ground up. Crafted by an award-winning team of teachers, researchers, and professionals from Stanford, MIT, Caltech, Google, and more, Brilliant's lessons are designed to develop your critical thinking skills through problem solving, not rote memorization. Each lesson is filled with hands-on problem solving that lets you play with concepts such as electric and digital circuits and gear systems, physical structures, and more. So what are you waiting for? Give learning a try. Give that big brain a workout by going to brilliant.org/filmspeak, scan the QR code on screen, or click the link in the description below. Brilliant's also giving our viewers 20% off an annual premium subscription, which gives you unlimited daily access to everything on Brilliant, which is pretty sweet, if I do say so. That's brilliant.org/filmspeak, scan the QR code on screen, or click the link in the description, get that sweet 20% off an annual premium subscription, and thank you so much to Brilliant for sponsoring this video.
Something you might want to say? However jumbled, however confused? Something? Am I presuming too much?
Guillermo del Toro understands that Victor Frankenstein is both creator and creation, shaped as much by his own circumstances as the creature will come to be shaped by his. Victor's father was abusive, disapproving, a figure of authority he didn't ask for but was stuck with once he failed to save his mother. That failure doesn't just haunt Victor, it redefines everything for him. His father becomes a fraud in his eyes, exposed as neither all-knowing nor all-powerful. If someone with that much authority, that much experience and confidence couldn't prevent the death of his mother, then the very concept of authority becomes suspect. Death becomes not just a tragedy, but an affront, proof that the systems meant to protect us are built on lies. So Victor makes it his manifesto, his mission to be greater than his father. He'll conquer death itself. He'll prove that obedience to the natural order is just submission to mediocrity, that defiance is the path to transcendence. He feels imbued with a higher calling, appointed by his own suffering to remake the rules, but in practice, he's just a blasphemous, angry man unable to reconcile himself with the fragility of existence and its unfair, unrelenting, unforgiving nature. That's exactly why he becomes so preoccupied with controlling it, a contemporary Prometheus monopolizing the fire in his hands. The theological implications here are deliberate, more so even than the mythological parallels. In Catholic doctrine, birth is out of our control.
Conception, that spark, the animation, thought and soul, that is in God's hands.
If creation belongs to the creator, Victor reasons then death, what comes after, should belong to the creation. It's a perverse inversion of divine hierarchy, but it makes a twisted kind of sense. Obedience means accepting death as natural and accepting your place in the order. Defiance means claiming agency over the one thing no one gets control over. Victor thinks he's playing God, but really he's playing out the oldest form of rebellion, the one that got Lucifer cast out of heaven. The refusal to submit, the insistence that the creation can become the creator. But of course, in his arrogance and delusion, Victor doesn't understand what creation actually requires. He thinks imbuing a corpse with a divine spark will be enough, that intelligence and capability come pre-packaged. The idea that he'd need to teach, to nurture, to raise what he's made never even occurs to him. In this way, he becomes exactly like his father, someone who expects instant results and greatness without understanding his own role in the process. The creature comes into consciousness, intelligent, capable of feeling, and possessed by emotional intelligence above all else. It just can't vocalize it yet.
The ability to speak does not make you intelligent.
But Victor doesn't see any of that. He simply sees a failed experiment, something useless, a waste of time because it didn't emerge perfect and ready-made. It didn't give him the answers he was seeking. Just as God created man man in his image, a selfish act. Man picks up the baton and does the same, only continuing the cycle. The truth is that the spark that makes up someone isn't solely dictated by the divine. It is a combination of nature and nurture. We are our parents, our friends, our spouses. We learn through experience and action. Victor may think he has the world figured out because of all that he's lost, all that he's endured, but all he sees is his own experience and maps that onto the people and places around him. It's why Elizabeth, while endeared by his scientific genius and a seeming understanding, will never love him because she is not the person he presumes she is, just as he is far crueler than he presents to her. This is fatherhood at its most destructive. Victor treats the creature not as a being in its own right, but as an extension of himself, something that exists only in relation to him, only in what it represents about his capabilities and failures. The creature is just existing, trying to figure out the world, but to Victor, it means something else entirely. Proof of his genius or vindication of his hubris. Guillermo del Toro maps his own childhood onto this dynamic with surgical precision. He grew up with questions, challenged the hypocrisy of the status quo, and those questions were met with an authority that demanded submission rather than offering explanation. His relationship with his father carried the same wounds that Victor inflicted on the creature. The sense of being seen only as an extension rather than an individual, valued only for what you represent to your creator rather than who you actually are.
This is the future. This is possible. Why not study it? Why not quantify it?
Part of the genius of Mary Shelley's original text, and what Del Toro amplifies here, is that the creature's education happens through art. He finds books, and through them gains a worldly, empathetic understanding that his actual upbringing never provided. Literature teaches him compassion. It shows him that the world contains beauty alongside cruelty, that suffering can be understood and articulated, that he's not alone in his pain, even if his specific circumstances are unique to him. This is Del Toro's mantra about the purpose of creation, of art itself. When you're unhappy with the world, you endeavor to create your own. For Victor, that meant conquering death through creating life. For an artist, a filmmaker, it means building stories that live beyond you, that grant a kind of immortality. But the problem in both cases is the same. The creator isn't considering the life the creation will have on its own. Del Toro knows this intimately. I mean, every film he makes is, in some sense, a child he's releasing into the world, hoping it will be understood, hoping it will live beyond him. But films take on lives of their own. Audiences bring their own experiences, their own wounds, their own needs into the viewing. Some people have responded to this Frankenstein with fury, right? Like Shelley purists insisting that her work should only exist, only as an extension of her, and only her, that Del Toro's interpretation violates some sacred boundary. But that response misses the whole point. Shelley's novel is itself about how creation escapes the creator's control, how meaning proliferates beyond intention. Death of the author, we've talked about it before, it's woven into the very fabric of Frankenstein, which makes this criticism particularly ironic, in my opinion. Guillermo del Toro isn't translating, he's adapting the text through his own vision, through his own experiences. He's pulling out the elements that spoke to him as an individual while remaining true to what the story is about. It's not like he's going into Frankenstein and just completely reworking and throwing everything out so that it doesn't even resemble the original text. No, that's all still there, but it's the way that he's interpreted that text. Everybody's gonna have their own interpretation of the text and different elements that speak to them, and that's what makes something like Frankenstein so interesting, so malleable. You can set it in different time periods, you can pull different aspects of it out. It's timeless, it's mythological, and so it shouldn't just adhere to one specific vision. The creature reads, learns, and through that learning becomes more than his early experiences. He possesses the same destructive tendencies as Victor, the same capacity for rage, for violence, for retribution, but he opts to turn the page rather than repeat it. He becomes an empathetic response to his creator's cruelty, just as Jesus exists as an empathetic response to the brutality of the Old Testament God. The creature takes in art and life and fiction, and through them achieves what Victor never could, the ability to see beyond himself, to feel for others, to grow, to love.
You can experience life either through life or through literature or fiction.
And for someone whose warped experience doesn't give them a great understanding of the world, fiction, art, can be the thing that allows them to understand not only themselves, but others. Art is the ultimate vehicle for empathy. It creates the space for change, for breaking cycles, for having a more worldly view of your environment and becoming greater than what you were raised to be.
Guardian angel, sweet companion, stand by my side and do not leave me.
As mentioned earlier, Del Toro's creature is his religion.
Do you identify more with Victor Frankenstein,
No,
the
monster,
creature?
The creature. I saw all that and I said, this is my shepherd, this creature. I understood Immaculate Conception, resurrection of the flesh, the stigmata, ecstasy.
He relates to the creature's struggle because it was his struggle. He understands why people latch on to the Messiah, onto Christ, even if he rejects the brutality of the dogma wrapped around those figures. The creature, like Christ, is blameless but made to suffer. The creature, like Christ, offers forgiveness that wasn't earned. The creature, like Del Toro himself, rejects the harsh, controlling, inhumane dogma while recognizing the universal truths buried underneath. Forgiveness, compassion, the radical act of seeing another person as fully human. That's the overall problem with religion as it's practiced. The message becomes polluted to the point where the religion loses its meaning. Man's exertion of control onto simple facts of life distorts them into weapons, into justifications for cruelty. Religion teaches rejection of those who don't fall in line, those who don't align with the rigidity of the dogma. There's a built-in rejection of empathy because of how doctrine has been twisted across generations. Del Toro, like the creature, rejects the harsh, controlling, inhumane dogma with which the universal truths of forgiveness and compassion are wrapped within. I think that's why Frankenstein speaks to him. It preaches the moral parables and allows him to understand life in a way that is empathetic towards the outcast. Weird is not inherently bad, but the fact that we as a society have collectively normalized calling weird is the problem. That's what gives it a negative connotation, and that's the issue here. It's the lack of honesty with ourselves that prohibits us from being the best version of ourselves we can be. It's precisely that makes Victor give up on his creation, flee from it, mark it for death, forsake it, and in turn makes society hunt the creature for simply existing. The creature's line about the hunter, the wolf, and the sheep captures this perfectly.
The hunter did not hate the wolf. The wolf did not hate the sheep, but violence felt inevitable between them. Perhaps this was the way of the world.
Fear of what we don't understand brings out innate cruelty. It isn't right, but there's an inevitability to it. Parents and children, society and outcasts. Everyone is quick to judge, to act with intense inhumanity because incomprehension reads as defect, as a monstrosity. No one asks to be born as they are, they just are. Born into families with generational baggage, saddled with trauma they don't deserve. In Christianity, you're taught that you're born into sin, unworthy until baptized. The unconditional love you should be afforded comes with conditions. The creature has it beaten into him that he's a thing, a monster unworthy of humanity. Only two people across the story afford him dignity. The blind man who understands him on a deeply intimate level without the distortion of sight, and Elizabeth, who feels equally judged and trapped by societal confines, imprisoned in a cage, observed, a trophy like the butterfly she and Victor catch in the film. She's desperate for a love where she's seen for who she is rather than who someone expects her to be.
You lied to me. You lied.
The thematics of Catholicism woven throughout the film become even more prominent when amplified by Del Toro's reclamation of Catholic aesthetics and iconography.
In terms of Catholic language, we have a crucifixion, crown of thorns, the wound on the side, resurrects after the third day of the battlefield. So it's full of that.
A reclamation. The pageantry of Catholic imagery is part of what gives it power and comfort. The marriage of beauty and decay, pleasure and enlightenment. It's brutal and violent, but depicted with seduction. It calms, creates ease while reminding you of the larger ideas it represents. That's why people are drawn to it, why it sticks. Del Toro uses that same approach to craft his monster, something newly minted and pure, something that draws your attention, to create lavish sets, environments, and costumes. There's artistry in reclaiming the iconography, in taking what was used to control and making it beautiful again on different terms. The luxury of religion is what makes these ideas stick, why people respond. They feel part of the richness and paradise promised. Del Toro takes that premium feel and gifts it to the audience. Something traditionally reserved for the upper class at an opera becomes an opera for everyone on the big screen or on their TVs at home. It's why the epics of old feel so striking and profound, and why this film, despite its imperfections, achieves a kind of grandeur we rarely see in films these days.
Paradise Lost. Man has questions for God. Even God has questions. Death probably intrigued him. Suffering.
This is the dynamic between the creature and Frankenstein, between creation and creator. If God and Jesus are one and the same, why did God send Jesus to die? What did he want to find out? There's a rejection here of the idea that they're identical. The Father lives within the Son, but the Son is wholly different. Jesus suffered the fate God made for him, not God himself. Yet Catholicism insists they're the same. It was all part of the plan, as if that justifies the cruelty. Del Toro refuses that easy answer. Victor and the creature are not the same, even though Victor's violence lives in the creature's body, even though the creature carries forward Victor's rage and self-destructive tendencies. What differs is choice. The creature chooses differently. He learns, adapts, grows beyond his origins. That's the hope Del Toro offers, that we're more than our early experiences, that we can control what we can control and adapt to what we can't, that we can create in constructive, beautiful ways rather than perpetuating cycles of harm. This is a lesson only time provides. We're young, full of empathy and love. Through our early experiences, our worldview takes form. We test boundaries, gain understanding. Del Toro came to understand his father's failings and resented him for it. His faith, his obedience as a Catholic and a son, wasn't rewarded, and that caused him to lash out. Similar to how the creature in Mary Shelley's original text related to Satan more than anyone else while reading Paradise Lost, you can see how Del Toro kind of feels the same way. But eventually, as Guillermo became a father himself, he gained a greater understanding of his father as a person removed from the shadow of being his parent. The point where the son becomes the father, where the immaturities of childhood still haunt you into parenthood. That's when you recognize the pattern and attempt to do better. That's what this film offers. The hope of breaking free of traumatic cycles that have been passed down through generations, of forgiving what can't be changed, of moving forward as flawed humans rather than locked in eternal resentment. To err is part of who we are. It doesn't make it right, it doesn't make us right, but as the film beautifully says in the end, if we can forgive and move on with our lives, perhaps we can break the cycle of trauma passed down through generations.
Perhaps now we can both be human. Consider this, my son. While you are alive, what recourse do you have but to live?
Victor spends his existence living in fear, haunted by death, haunted by his mother's death, and the trauma it caused him. In a fucked up way, this led him to creating a miracle in the creature, and he couldn't conceive of being a parent, of breaking the cycle that he'd been perpetuating that plagued his father before him. All of this is why Victor can't embrace his creation with the unconditional love the creature has for him. All he considers is himself, how the experience makes him feel. He's obsessed with things he can't control and misses what's right in front of him. Life, love, the opportunity to actually live rather than merely conquer death. That's what the creature and Elizabeth exemplify. People restrained and contorted, villainized and ostracized by systems who managed to shake free, taking in the moments of life that matter. Elizabeth's final moments are profound precisely because of this. She chooses to live a brief existence in the arms of someone who truly sees her, who loves her the way she desperately wants to be loved, rather than a long, tortured life only being half alive, caged. It's a choice Victor never allows for himself, never considers. He's so afraid of death that he never permits himself to live. The film's ending, which deviates from Shelley's original, is Del Toro's most personal statement. It's not as spiteful as the novel's conclusion, but it's no less tragic or beautiful. Victor finally recognizes the pain he's caused and apologizes. The creature, in turn, gives Victor the forgiveness needed to face his fear, the unknown, with a little more strength. Victor's left his mark. The creature is forced to roam the earth in a kind of purgatory, the curse of eternal life that Del Toro finds horrifying. Alone, unable to embrace the peace of death, but afforded the opportunity to experience all that life offers, basking in its warmth while remaining firmly planted in the cold reality he exists in. The creature's assertion that Victor will no longer be his master takes on new meaning. Initially a threat of retribution, it becomes a declaration of autonomy. He is the master of his own fate, the captain of his own life. Victor created him, scarred him, abandoned him, but does not define him. That's the freedom Del Toro seeks, the freedom he's explored throughout his entire filmmaking career, through every monster, every outcast, every creation, searching for the right to simply be.
Say my name one last time. The way you said it at the beginning, when it meant the world to you. Victor.
It's okay to be imperfect. It's okay to make mistakes. We're all living life for the first and only time, and the impossible standards set by society make it pretty damn difficult to exist. We're always trying to conform, operating under warped perceptions of love and success. There's something cathartic about seeing the creature on a big screen embrace who he is as an individual, no longer controlled by his creator. Yes, he experiences failure. Yes, he makes mistakes. He can be violent and angry, and he must cope with it and learn on his own terms. But that allows him to better understand himself. This is what makes Frankenstein Del Toro's masterpiece. It's not his most polished film, but its self-indulgence feels earned after a nearly 50-year-long pursuit, if you can believe that. This is Del Toro giving himself permission to be messy, to make the film he's wanted to make his whole life without worrying whether it satisfies everyone. Frankenstein is the answer to the questions he had as a child, questions about why fathers hurt their children, why creators abandon their creations, why institutions demand obedience while practicing cruelty, while love sometimes comes with so many conditions. The film doesn't offer neat answers because life doesn't offer neat answers. What it offers instead is the possibility of forgiveness, of breaking cycles, of ceasing the pain and allowing each party, father and son, creator and creation, to exist. If no one tells you about generational trauma, you don't necessarily think to talk about it. You don't necessarily register that that's exactly what it is, and that's how it gets passed down. Del Toro is telling you about his in hopes that it may help you with yours. He's making peace with his identity, with the ways his Catholic upbringing shaped and scarred him, with his complicated relationship with his father, with his own failures and fears as a creator and a parent. He's reclaiming Catholic imagery and the stranglehold it's had on his life. This is Guillermo del Toro's Catholic epic. Redemption, forgiveness, acceptance. These are all the core pillars of his Frankenstein, the pillars he's explored throughout his entire career. It's about learning empathy through art, about the right to be weird and flawed and human. It's about forgiving the unforgivable, not because it's deserved, but because holding on to that rage destroys you more than it helps. Finally, Del Toro has been able to bring all of these elements together in their purest form. He's always understood that the monsters are us, our fears, our failings, our refusal to accept what we've made and who we are. His Frankenstein remains true to the spirit of Shelley's original, channeled through his specific lens, refusing to shy away from the existential questions he's probed that have defined his life as an artist. Like the creature, it's perfectly imperfect, like all of us, like life itself. And perhaps that's all we can ask for of our creations. Not perfection, but honesty, authenticity. Not something to exert control over, but something nourished by love. Not regrets over what should be, but an acceptance of what is.